My father called me a worthless daughter at his retirement party. My $17 million trust proved him wrong. Can you imagine your own father standing by while your stepmother, in front of 200 guests, publicly orders security to drag you out of his retirement party? That night, I didn't just leave. In less than an hour, I pulled the financial rug out from under them so hard it collapsed. 20 years of her meticulous planning, leaving my entire family in a state of absolute, unforgettable panic. My name is Laura Paxton, and I'm 34 years old. That was the night I finally stopped being invisible. But to truly understand why I did what I did, I need to take you back, just 11 months earlier, to the day I received an email from a dead woman. My father, Richard Paxton, was a force. A commercial real estate titan whose name was on half the office parks north of New York City. That was his kingdom. 35 years of buying land, building skyscrapers, shaking hands with men whose watches cost more than most people's homes. But his empire? It had a foundation most people never saw. My mother, Catherine Hale, she died when I was just 11. Ovarian cancer. 8 brutal months from diagnosis to funeral. Then she was just gone. Like someone blew out a candle in the middle of dinner. What I remember most isn't the hospital. It isn't the crushing silence afterward. It's our kitchen table. My mother, patiently teaching me how to draw a floor plan. She'd sketch the bones of a building, the load-bearing walls, the hidden geometry holding everything up. See, Laura, she'd say, everything beautiful starts with structure. I didn't know then that she was an architect. A licensed, practicing architect with her own firm. No one ever told me. That crucial detail, it got buried, along with everything else about her. Just 8 months after her funeral, 8 months, my father married Diane Hartwell. I remember the morning, he told me. I was sitting at that same kitchen table, drawing our house from memory. He sat across from me and said, "You're going to have a new mother, sweetheart." I was 11. How do you tell your father you don't want a new mother? So I said nothing. That was the first time I chose silence. It wouldn't be the last. And then there was Diane. Diane Paxton, née Hartwell. Oh, she was a master. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and rearrange it without moving a single piece of furniture. She did it with tone, with timing, with this uncanny ability to make every suggestion sound like a kindness and every command like a polite question. Chanel tweed? She wore it like it was denim. Casually, constantly, as if it just appeared on her body each morning. Her hair? Always blown out, always honey blonde, always exactly the same. I never once saw Diane Paxton look unprepared. That should have been my first warning, shouldn't it? Within a year, the Thanksgiving seating chart changed. I went from sitting next to my father to the smaller table in the sunroom. "You're just so much more comfortable away from the crowd, aren't you, Laura?" she'd coo. By year 3, the family Christmas card. Guess who was on it? Diane, my father, and Meredith, Diane's daughter from her first marriage, born 2 years after me. I was told the photographer ran out of time for my solo shots. By year 5, my bedroom became Diane's yoga studio. My childhood, boxed up, moved to the guest room. "You'll be leaving for college soon anyway," she said. "No point in wasting space." She introduced Meredith as our daughter. Me? I was Richard's daughter from before. Before, as if I were a rough draft my father had since revised. And that Cartier love bracelet on her wrist? 18-karat gold, given for their 10th anniversary? I later learned it was paid for with money from the family trust. A trust built, in part, on my mother's inheritance. But I didn't know that then. Not for a long, long time. I became a restoration architect. Most people don't even know what that is. I work on buildings everyone else has forgotten. A crumbling Carnegie Library, a 19th century firehouse, a schoolhouse with a collapsed roof. I strip back the decay, find the original bones, bring them back to life. It's painstaking. It's physical. Some days, I'm covered in plaster dust, crawling through attics with a flashlight in my teeth. I make a good living, a perfectly good living. But in the Paxton world, where Meredith's Instagram sponsorship deal was worth double my salary for posting pictures of handbags, my career was a punchline. Last Christmas, at the family dinner I was grudgingly invited to, Meredith announced her latest brand deal, Diane absolutely beaming. Then the table turned to me. Diane tilted her head, that sickeningly sweet smile on her face, and said, "And Laura, have you found anything more stable yet?" As if my entire career was just a phase. A decade-long gap year. My father? He looked at his plate. He always looked at his plate. That night, I drove home in my 7-year-old Subaru Outback, paid off, 200,000 miles. Meredith's brand new Mercedes GLC was parked right next to it. She'd patted my hood on the way in. Cute car. Very you. I didn't answer. I just drove. That's what I'd always done. Drove and swallowed. Drove and swallowed. But what none of them knew was that 6 weeks earlier, the Historic Preservation Society had awarded me their highest honor for that Carnegie Library project. I didn't tell them. I'd stopped offering good news to people who only knew how to diminish it. That project, though, that library, it would change everything. I just didn't know it yet. Fast forward 11 months before that disastrous party. I was on the floor of my Brooklyn Heights apartment, sifting through a box I hadn't opened in years. It was my mother's. Battered cardboard, carried from house to dorm to apartment. At the very bottom, beneath old birthday cards, there it was, a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, heavy stock. On the front, in my mother's handwriting, that slanted, confident script I'd recognize anywhere, it simply said, "For Laura, when she's ready." My hands were actually shaking when I opened it. Inside, a single sheet of her personal letterhead. And this is the part that stopped my breathing. Catherine Hale, AIA. Hale Architecture and Preservation. My mother? She had been a licensed architect. She had her own firm. No one, not my father, not Diane, not a single person in 23 years, had ever told me. Below that letterhead, in that same familiar hand, "My darling girl, there are things about our family's money I need you to understand when you're old enough. I've made arrangements to protect what's yours. Mr. Aldridge has everything. Find him." Tucked behind it, a business card. Thomas Aldridge, Esquire, Trusts and Estates. I sat there on the floor for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and searched his name. He was 67, still practicing. I typed out an email. My mother was Catherine Hale Paxton. She left me a letter. She told me to find you. 2 hours later, his reply came. The subject line? "I've been waiting for this email for 23 years, Miss Paxton." He said he had a document I needed to see. In person. How soon could I come? I went the very next morning. But before I tell you about that meeting, there's something vital you need to understand about my father. Richard Paxton wasn't a villain. That's what made it so much worse. A villain you can hate cleanly. My father? He was far more complicated. A man who loved me, I truly believe, but simply lacked the courage to show it when it might cost him anything. I have one memory that always comes back to me. I was 14. He picked me up from school, completely out of the blue. Drove me to the west side of town where this beautiful old stone building was being demolished. We just sat there, watching the wrecking ball swing. He was quiet for ages. Then he said, so softly, "Your mother would have fought to save that building." That was the last time he ever mentioned her name. After that, Catherine Hale Paxton became a ghost in her own house. Her photographs vanished. Her books were boxed away. Her name was replaced by Diane's in every sentence, every tradition, every toast. And my father? He just let it happen, one erasure at a time. Because Diane's tears were always louder than my silence. 3 weeks before the party, I called him. "My father. I just wanted coffee, just us." He said yes immediately. And for a split second, something warm and unfamiliar flickered inside me. Then, 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Diane's voice. "Your father's schedule is very full right now, Laura. Maybe after the party." A week later, the invitation arrived. Heavy cardstock, gold foil. And my name? Laura Paxton Hartwell. Diane's maiden name, hyphenated onto mine. Like a brand. That's when I decided. I would go. But first I was seeing Thomas Aldridge. 3 weeks out from the party, Diane began building her stage. The first move? A message I sent to the family group chat asking about arrival times. It sat there, delivered, but unanswered for 3 days. On Thursday, I opened iMessage. The thread was dead. Nothing. I texted Meredith. "Is the family chat broken?" She replied, "Oh, Mom made a new one. Must have been a glitch." There was no glitch. There is never a glitch with Diane. I called the event coordinator at the Whitmore Hotel. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't have a Paxton on the guest list. Are you a +1?" The floor shifted beneath me. Not surprise, not shock. Recognition. I'd seen this pattern. The slow, mechanical precision of being disappeared. But this time, the machinery was accelerating. I called Diane directly. She picked up on the second ring. She always did. "Diane never wanted to seem like she was avoiding you." "Laura, what a surprise," she purred. "I wasn't sure you'd come, given everything." She let that loaded pause hang. "But please, don't wear one of your work outfits. This is black tie." I told her I'd be there. She said she'd have someone add my name. That evening, I checked the American Express Platinum card my father had set up for me. Still active. And for the first time, I looked at the account structure. Every card, every club membership, every insurance rider in the Paxton family, all linked to the same trust. The same pool of money. I was finally starting to understand whose money it really was. 2 weeks before the party, I drove out to Westchester. I wanted to give my father his retirement gift early. I wanted to see him without the noise, without the performance. Just father and daughter. I'd spent 3 months restoring it. An original architectural rendering of the very first commercial property he'd ever bought back in 1989. I'd tracked down the original blueprint, stabilized the paper, reframed it in reclaimed walnut. It was a gift, I thought, that said, "I see who you were, Dad, before all of this." He opened it in the living room. His eyes went soft. His fingers hovered over the glass. For a moment, he was somewhere else. Somewhere before Diane, before the gold foil invitations. "Laura," he started. But Diane appeared in the doorway. She glanced at my gift the way you'd glance at a child's finger painting. "That's sweet, Laura," she chirped. "But we already have the walls full. Meredith commissioned a portrait of your father. Oil on canvas. By a real artist." My father set my gift down on a side table. He didn't fight for it. He never fought for anything that was mine. Diane guided him toward the kitchen. I stood alone. Above the mantel hung the portrait Meredith had commissioned. Oil on canvas, gilded frame. My father, Diane behind him, Meredith at his side, smiling. The composition was complete. No empty space. No room for anyone else. As I turned to leave, I heard Diane's voice from the kitchen door, low and venomous. "She's going to make a scene, Richard. You know how she is. She'll bring up her mother and ruin everything. Maybe we should prepare security." My father's reply was barely audible. "She's my daughter, Diane." And Diane's response? Perfectly clear. "Exactly. And daughters should know their place." I walked out. But as I passed Diane's study, I saw it on her desk. A manila folder. Trust amendment draft printed across the tab. I didn't stop. I didn't open it. But I saw it. And I remembered. The following Saturday, Meredith called me. Not to catch up, of course. Meredith never called to just catch up. She needed a second opinion on her outfit for the party. We met at Bergdorf Goodman, 5th Avenue. The kind of place where the air smells expensive and the saleswomen remember your name if you spend enough. They definitely remembered Meredith's. She tried on 7 dresses in 90 minutes. Oscar de la Renta, Valentino, a beaded Marchesa that cost more than my monthly rent. Each one brought out on a velvet hanger by an associate who called her Miss Paxton and treated her like minor royalty. The total? North of $12,000. Meredith didn't even blink. She just handed over a black card, linked, like everything else, to the family trust. When I stepped up to pay for my own shoes, simple black, $200 from my own account, The sales associate looked at my card, then at me, and said, "And you are?" Meredith laughed. Not cruelly, not really. Worse. Absently. Like the answer was just obvious. "Oh, she's my half-sister," she chirped. "She restores old buildings. Like, physically, with her hands." The way she said it. With her hands. As if labor were a quaint little hobby. As if the blisters, the plaster dust, the 100-year-old beams I'd saved from collapse were somehow less real than her $12,000 dress charge to someone else's money. On the drive home, Meredith delivered the message I'd been waiting for. "Laura, Mom thinks you shouldn't give a speech at the party. It's better if you just attend. You know, Dad doesn't like being emotional in public." I didn't answer. I just drove. That's what I'd always done. Drove and swallowed. Drove and swallowed. Meredith's Jimmy Choo bags rustled softly in the back seat. My single Nordstrom rack bag sat on the floor, tucked between my feet at a red light, like something trying not to take up too much space. A week before the party, I had lunch with Ellen Marsh, my mother's closest friend. One of the few people in my life who still said Catherine's name out loud, naturally, as if she were a real person, not a footnote. We met at the French bistro my mother used to take me to. White tablecloths, copper pots, a waiter who still remembered my mom's standing order. Ellen was quieter than usual, rearranging her silverware. Finally, halfway through her second glass of Sancerre, she said it. "Laura, is it true you were let go from your job?" I put down my fork.
"Who told you that?"
"Diane," she sighed. "At the Garden Club luncheon. She said you've been struggling. No stable income. Relying on your father." Ellen paused, clearly uncomfortable. "She said you have mental health difficulties, that you push everyone away, that the family has been trying to help, but you won't accept it." Then Ellen whispered, "She called you the frigid daughter." I sat perfectly still. I had not been fired. I had never relied on my father for a single dollar since college. And my mental health, while certainly tested by 23 years of Diane Paxton, was not something I discussed with anyone at the Garden Club. Diane was building a story, seeding it into every circle that mattered. The charity boards, the country club wives. So that when the party came, everyone would already believe the narrative. Laura Paxton is unstable, uninvited, unwelcome. That way, when she had me removed, no one would question it. They'd just nod and whisper, "Poor thing." It was only a matter of time. Ellen reached across the table and took my hand. "I didn't believe her, Laura. Your mother was the strongest woman I knew, and you are her daughter." I squeezed Ellen's hand, and something inside me that had been bending for a very, very long time, it stopped bending. It started straightening. The night before the party, I sat alone in my apartment. Quiet. Brooklyn quiet. I looked at the photograph of my mother. Catherine Hale, 31, sawdust in her hair, laughing.
"Alive. I thought about not going."
I really did. I could stay here, in my quiet, in my carefully built life. Let them have their party, their portrait, their narrative. I could swallow this one, too. I was so good at swallowing. But then I looked at her letter, pinned above my desk. Find him. I had found him. I knew the truth now. About the trust. About the $17 million. About the provisions my mother had written into law before the cancer took her. I had the documents. I had the authority. Thomas Aldridge was standing by. I hadn't used any of it yet, because I wanted to give my father one more chance. If Richard Paxton stood next to me at that party, if he introduced me to his colleagues, if he said my name the way a father should, just once, I would put those documents back in the drawer and never speak of them again. I was offering him the easiest test in the world. Choose your daughter. Just once. I laid out my dress. Midnight navy, clean lines, impeccable tailoring. Nothing flashy. Nothing that begged for attention. I took out my mother's Mikimoto pearl earrings, the only thing of hers Diane hadn't managed to claim. I held them.
Cool. Smooth.
Impossibly steady. Then I picked up my phone and called Thomas Aldridge. "If I need you tomorrow," I said, "can you execute within the hour?"
His voice was calm.
Precise. Unhurried. Everything has been ready for 23 years, Miss Paxton. I set my alarm for 7. I hung the dress on the back of my door. And I slept.
Deeply. Clearly.
The way you sleep when you finally stopped hoping and started deciding. The Whitmore Hotel on a Saturday evening in October. Pure opulence. Chandeliers the size of cars. Marble floors polished to a mirror. Waitstaff in black tie. 200 guests. Richard's world. I gave my name. The young woman at reception scrolled. Searched. Paxton. Laura. I'm sorry, I don't see.
Oh, wait.
Here. She pointed. You were added yesterday. Yesterday. 200 guests confirmed months in advance, and I was squeezed into the margin like a typo. Thank you, I said and walked in. And then it hit me. In waves. The whispers. Not shouts, just whispers. That's the frigid daughter. I heard she's been out of work for months. She can't do anything right. Diane says she just shows up and causes scenes. Diane's seeds were blooming exactly on schedule. I kept my back straight. I kept walking. I scanned the room for my father and found him near the stage, surrounded by Diane and Meredith, all three smiling for a photographer. Perfectly composed. Perfectly lit. No one looked for me. No one called my name. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw them. 2 men in dark suits, earpieces. Security. They were watching me. They'd been told to watch me. I walked across that ballroom. It's a strange thing, walking through a crowd primed to see you as a problem. Every smile felt like a flinch. Every turned shoulder felt deliberate. I passed tables of my father's business partners, men I'd known since childhood. Not one said hello. Diane's narrative had done its work. I wasn't Richard Paxton's daughter anymore. I was the cautionary tale. I reached the small circle around my father. Richard saw me first. His face did something complicated. A flicker of warmth, then raw panic. He opened his mouth. But before the words came, Diane's hand was on his shoulder, fingers pressing into his tuxedo. A leash pulled taut. Laura, he managed. Glad you could make it. 5 words. The same 5 words you'd say to a colleague you barely recognized. Diane turned. Radiant. Cream silk gown. Diamonds. That particular smile she wore when she was about to draw blood. Her voice, pitched just loud enough for everyone to hear. Laura, what a surprise. I wasn't sure you'd come, given everything. She let the pause hang, inviting them to fill in the blanks. Then, softer, almost tender. Well, just don't make it about yourself, okay? Tonight is about family. Family, the word landed like a slap. Meredith appeared. Laura, love the dress. Is that from last season? I ignored her. I hadn't come for Meredith. I looked at my father. Dad, I said, can I talk to you for a moment? Alone. Richard's eyes moved toward me. I saw it. The instinct. The flicker of yes. His body leaned half an inch. Then Diane's hand tightened on his arm. Richard, the Hendersons are waiting. You can talk to Laura later. Silk over steel. My father straightened. Looked at Diane. Looked at me. And then he turned and walked toward the Hendersons, Diane guiding him like a rudder. I stood alone. An older woman I didn't recognize passed, whispering to her companion, poor thing. Diane told me she's been struggling.
Such a shame.
Her mother was wonderful. Yes, my mother was wonderful. And she left me more than anyone in this room understood. This is what I knew as I stood there, 3 weeks earlier, in Thomas Aldridge's office, 14th floor, Madison Avenue. Dust motes dancing in the dim light. Behind his desk, a framed photograph of my mother, younger than I'd ever seen her, hard hat, a grin. Your mother retained me in 2003, Aldridge began, when she first learned about the cancer. She wanted to ensure her assets, specifically, the inheritance she brought into the marriage from the Hale family, would be protected for you. He slid a document across his mahogany desk. The trust agreement of 2004. 40 pages, leather-bound. My mother's signature in blue ink. He explained it in plain English, just as my mother had instructed him, 23 years in advance. Catherine Hale had entered her marriage with $17 million in inherited family wealth. That money was placed into the Paxton Family Trust, yes, but with a critical legal distinction: segregated funds, walled off, legally separate, even though it sat in the same account. Your mother signed an amendment in 2006, Aldridge continued, sliding a second document. 6 months before she passed. It designated you, Laura Catherine Paxton, as the sole beneficiary of those segregated funds, effective upon your 30th birthday. No co-signatures required. No trustee approval needed. I stared at the page. My mother's handwriting in the margin. For my girl. Does my father know about this? I asked. Aldridge paused. The kind of pause that gives you the answer before the words. Your father was present when the original trust was established. He has always known. The air left the room. And Diane? I whispered. Mrs. Paxton was never informed. She appears to believe the entire $42 million in the trust belongs to the family generally. He folded his hands. She's been contacting my firm and the fiduciary manager, Rebecca Stone, requesting access to the trust provisions. He smiled thinly. Ms. Stone correctly declined. $17 million. My mother had built a wall around it, with paper and ink and foresight, and it had held for 23 years. What happens, I asked slowly, if I withdraw it? The remaining $25 million, he said, won't cover the loans your stepmother authorized using the full $42 million as collateral. The bank will issue a margin call.
I sat with that for a long time.
I'm not going to sign today, I told him. He raised an eyebrow. Give me until after the party. I want to see if my father chooses me. Aldridge looked at my mother's photograph on the wall, then back at me. Your mother, he said, would understand. I left his office with copies of both documents in a folder. And something I hadn't carried in years.
A choice.
Now you know what I knew when I stood there in that ballroom. Let me tell you what happened next. The speeches began at 8:30. Diane took the microphone first. Of course she did. Flawless. Cream silk gown, diamonds blazing. She thanked the guests, praised Richard, called Meredith up for a collective awe. She spoke about family, loyalty, home. My name? Never mentioned. My mother's name? Never.
Once.
When the applause faded, I stood up. I wasn't going to make a speech. I just wanted to walk to the front, hand my father his gift. A small velvet box holding a brass compass I'd painstakingly restored. The same one my mother had given him when they were young, in love, engraved with her initials, H. I just wanted to say something quiet.
Private.
Something that was ours. I was 10 steps from the stage when Diane saw me coming. Her expression didn't change. That's what I remember most. Her control. She leaned into the microphone, and in a voice as clear and calm as a dinner bell, she said, "Security." The ballroom murmured. Heads turned. Then she said it again. Every word precise. Every syllable designed to carry. Please remove this woman. She wasn't invited, and she's causing a disruption. 200 people went silent. The jazz quartet stopped. The bartender paused mid-pour. Every single eye in that room swiveled to me. Standing alone, in the center aisle, holding a small velvet box, wearing my mother's pearls. I looked at my father, Richard Paxton, 3 steps from the microphone, 3 steps from his wife, 3 steps from his daughter.
He looked at Diane.
He looked at me, and then he looked down at the floor.
He said
nothing. 2 security guards materialized on either side of me. Ma'am. The one on my left said quietly, "We've been asked to escort you out." The room watched. Some looked away. Some didn't. Meredith, near the stage, had her phone up, filming. Her sister. Being removed. I realized. I set the velvet box on the nearest table. I didn't throw it. I didn't slam it. I placed it gently. The way you'd set down something you loved and were leaving behind. Then I looked at my father one last time. And I said, not loudly, not with anger, just clearly enough for the people nearby to hear, "I came for you, Dad. Not for her. But I see your choice." I turned. I walked toward the exit, back straight,
Eyes dry.
my mother's Mikimoto pearls catching the last of the chandelier light as I passed through the double doors. Behind me, I heard Diane's voice return to the microphone. I'm so sorry about that, everyone. Now, where were we? The jazz quartet started up again. Before the doors even closed, the October air hit me like a slap.
Cold. Raw.
I sat on the top step of the Whitmore Hotel, marble smooth and cold beneath my dress. I gave myself 60 seconds. 60 seconds to feel it. All of it. The searing humiliation. The gaping silence where my father's voice should have been. The knowledge that 200 people had just watched me be erased and then gone back to their champagne. 60 seconds for every swallowed word. Every Christmas at the small table. Every time I'd driven home and told myself it didn't matter. Then I stood up. Because my mother didn't raise me to sit on other people's steps. I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca Stone. She picked up on the first ring. I'd warned her this call might come tonight. Rebecca, this is Laura Paxton. I'm ready to proceed with the segregated fund transfer. Tonight. Her voice was steady, professional, unsurprised. I'll need your digital signature and the authorization code from Mr. Aldridge. I can execute within 45 minutes. You'll have them in 10. I hung up. The ballroom music swelled behind the glass doors. I didn't look back. Later, Ellen Marsh told me what happened inside. Diane, back at the microphone as if nothing had occurred, smoothed her speech. Family is about loyalty, she purred. And tonight we celebrate a man who built everything from nothing. From nothing, as if $17 million of Catherine Hale's inheritance was nothing. As if the foundation beneath the foundation didn't exist. The room applauded. Meredith posted her Instagram story. Family first. No mention of the sister, who'd just been dragged out. Ellen said a few guests shifted uncomfortably. A woman whispered, "That didn't feel right." But no one spoke. No one stood. That's the thing about rooms full of polite people. Politeness is just another word for complicity when someone's being dragged out in front of you. Richard sat at the head table. He didn't eat.
Didn't speak.
Ellen said he kept looking at the velvet box I'd left. Untouched. Like a small monument to something broken. He didn't open it. Diane leaned over to a man. Laura has always been difficult. Catherine spoiled her. But we've tried our best. The narrative held. The room believed. The party continued. And while they danced and drank and told themselves everything was fine, I was sitting in my car in the hotel parking lot, about to press a button that would change all of it. My laptop was already in the car. I'd brought it that evening the way a surgeon brings a scalpel, hoping not to use it, prepared if she had to. I opened it on the passenger seat. The screen lit the interior of my Subaru in a pale blue. The Whitmore Hotel parking lot stretched dark and quiet. Inside, 200 people danced. Out here, it was just me, a Wi-Fi hotspot, and 23 years of silence finally reaching their limit. I dialed a conference call. Thomas Aldridge. Rebecca Stone. Authorization code, Aldridge said. He rattled off 12 alphanumeric characters.
Calm.
Precise. As if reading a weather report. This authorizes the transfer of segregated funds from the Paxton Family Trust to the Laura Paxton Irrevocable Trust per the Trust Agreement of 2004 and Amendment of 2006. Rebecca confirmed. Miss Paxton, I'll need your digital signature on the DocuSign document I'm sending now. My phone buzzed. I opened the email. Read every line. Because my mother taught me everything beautiful starts with structure.
And I signed.
Processing, Rebecca said. Estimated completion, 45 minutes. While I waited, I did the rest. 3 American Express Platinum cards. Diane and Meredith. Linked to the Trust's collateral covenant. Country club memberships, supplemental insurance riders. All of it tethered to the same pool of funds that was about to shrink by $17 million. I wasn't canceling anything out of spite. I was just watching arithmetic do what arithmetic does. At 9:47 p.m., Rebecca called back. Transfer complete. $17,420,316.78. The funds are in your trust, Miss Paxton. I closed my laptop, sat in the dark for a moment, just listened to my own breathing. Then I turned off my phone, started the engine, and drove home to Brooklyn. When I turned my phone back on, 40 minutes later, there were 12 missed calls. By the time I set it on my kitchen counter, it was 29. By the time I finished making tea, 56. 56 calls. They hadn't called me 56 times in the last 23 years combined. You want to know what those 56 calls sounded like from the other end? At 9:52 p.m., 5 minutes after the transfer cleared, Meredith tried to buy a round of drinks. Her card declined. She laughed, embarrassed, and pulled out another. Declined. A third. Declined. The bartender's smile went stiff. Meredith's cheeks burned crimson. At 9:58 p.m., Diane's phone buzzed. A notification from the fiduciary firm. Bold type. Urgent. Action required. Significant asset movement in Paxton Family Trust. Diane stepped away from the dance floor. She called Rebecca Stone. Rebecca, professional and neutral, explained, "A beneficiary has exercised their right to withdraw segregated funds under the original trust agreement. I'm not authorized to disclose further details by phone." Ellen told me she watched the color drain from Diane's face in real time, like watching a screen go dark. The smile, the composure, the certainty, all gone. In the space of a single phone call, Diane walked straight to Richard, gripped his arm, and dragged him to a quiet corner. "What did you do?" she hissed. Richard just stared. "What are you talking about?" Diane pulled up the trust portal on her phone. Her fingers were shaking. The account balance, $42 million that morning, now read $24,957,683.22. And in the transaction log, one line, segregated fund withdrawal. Beneficiary, Laura C. Paxton. Richard's face went gray. Diane's champagne flute was still in her hand. Her fingers trembled around the stem. And for the first time in 23 years, the woman who controlled every room she entered looked like she'd lost the floor beneath her feet. That little, she caught herself, lowered her voice. "She can't do this, Richard. Call her now." He called. I didn't answer. He called again, and again, and again. By then, I was already home, the calls stacking up like silent accusations. My apartment in Brooklyn Heights. A third-floor walk-up. I chose it because the ceilings are high, the windows face east, and every morning the light comes through like it's filtered honey. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and just let it vibrate. The messages came in waves. Meredith first, frantic. "Laura, what did you do?" Then Diane, no longer velvet, no longer measured. "You have no right. This is family money." Then Meredith again. "My cards aren't working. Laura, this isn't funny." Then Richard. The simplest. The one that hurt the most. "Laura, please call me. We need to talk." Then Diane again, sharp as broken glass. "I'm calling our lawyer. You'll regret this." I watched the screen light up and go dark, like a heartbeat monitor for a family in cardiac arrest. I didn't answer. I ran a bath, took off that midnight navy dress, unclipped my mother's pearls, stepped into the hot water until the steam softened the edges of everything. When I got out, I put on a sweater, made chamomile tea, and sat in my chair, looked at my mother's photograph. "I did what you asked, Mom," I said to the empty room. "I found him. And I found what you left for me." The phone had stopped ringing. 56 calls total. I checked the time, 11:08 p.m. Then the intercom buzzed. I looked at the screen. There they were, all three, standing on my stoop at 11:15 on a Saturday night. Richard, in his tuxedo, tie loosened, face the color of wet concrete. Diane, still in her cream silk gown, mascara tracked down both cheeks, clutching her Hermes bag like a life raft. And Meredith, half a step behind, phone clutched to her chest, eyes swollen and red. For 23 years, I had gone to them. To their house, their dinners, their parties, their terms. I had driven to Westchester, sat at the small table, smiled through comments designed to shrink me. I had rung their doorbell, like a guest in my own family. Now they were at mine. I didn't move right away. I just stood at the intercom, absorbing it. Diane Paxton, who hadn't visited my apartment in 7 years, standing on my stoop, mascara on her face, panic in her posture. There was something in that image I needed to absorb. Then I walked to my desk drawer, pulled out the folder. Trust documents, transfer confirmation, and one more thing. Something I hadn't mentioned to anyone yet.
I tucked it at the back.
I checked my reflection in the hall mirror. Cashmere sweater, hair down, no makeup.
Clean.
Simple.
Mine.
I pressed the intercom. Come up. I unlocked the front door and opened it before they reached the landing. Diane was first, heels clicking on the old wood, already drawing breath for whatever she'd been rehearsing. She crossed my threshold and started. How dare you? I raised one hand. Not dramatically. Just enough. You are at my door, Diane. Lower your voice. Or leave. She stopped. Mid-word. Mid-breath. It was, I think, the first time in 23 years anyone had said no to Diane Paxton on a doorstep. She looked at me like I'd spoken a language she didn't know I understood. I stepped aside. Come in. But I'll be the one talking tonight. They sat in my living room the way people sit in a doctor's office when the news is already bad. Richard took the armchair by the window. He looked shrunken in his tuxedo. A man built for conference rooms, now compressed into a Brooklyn apartment that smelled like chamomile and old books. Diane stood, refused to sit. Standing was control, and she wasn't ready to give that up. Meredith perched on the edge of the sofa, arms crossed, phone clutched. Diane fired first. You stole from this family. That money belongs to your father. I opened the folder on my coffee table. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I'd spent my career uncovering the original structures of buildings, finding the load-bearing walls beneath decades of bad renovations. And that's exactly what I was about to do now. That money, I said, $17 million, never belonged to my father. I slid the trust agreement across the table. 40 pages, leather-bound. It belonged to my mother, Catherine Hale Paxton, your predecessor. The room contracted. Diane's eyes locked on the document, like it was a weapon. The trust agreement of 2004, I continued, drafted by Thomas Aldridge, executed by my mother before her diagnosis progressed. It designates $17 million, her family inheritance from the Hale estate, as segregated funds within the Paxton Family Trust. Legally separate. Walled off. Mine. Diane's voice came out thin. That's a fake. Richard, tell her. She turned to my father. Richard was staring at the document. He didn't look up. He didn't deny it. The silence in that room was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. You knew, I said. Not a question. Didn't you, Dad? My father's throat moved. His hands gripped the arms of the chair. When he spoke, his voice had the cracked quality of something that had been sealed shut for a very, very long time. Your mother, she set it up before she got sick. I should have told you. Diane turned to Richard as if she'd been struck. You knew. He said nothing, but his silence was its own confession. 23 years of it. Finally audible. I placed the second document on the table. The amendment of 2006. Signed by my mother 6 months before she died. It names me, Laura Catherine Paxton, as sole beneficiary of the segregated funds. Effective on my 30th birthday. No co-signature. No trustee approval. I'm 34. I exercised my legal right tonight. I sat back. The documents lay between us. Between my cup of chamomile tea and Diane's trembling hands. I didn't steal anything, Diane. I reclaimed what was always mine. The documents are right here. You're welcome to read them. Diane read.
Fast.
Her eyes scanned the pages, flipping, searching for the crack, the loophole, the mistake. She didn't find one. My mother had been meticulous. Aldridge had been meticulous. 23 years of legal architecture. Built to hold. When Diane looked up, she'd shifted tactics. The fury was gone, replaced by something I'd seen 100 times. The chin quiver. the careful widening of the eyes, the trembling hand pressed to her collarbone. Victim mode. Her most practiced performance. Richard, she breathed, turning to my father. She's tearing this family apart. After everything I've done for this family, for her. I cut her off. Not with volume. With information. Speaking of what you've done, Diane, I know about the trust amendment you've been drafting. The performance collapsed. Instantaneous. Like watching a mass crack. Her hand dropped. Her mouth opened. Then closed. The room went vacuum silent. 3 weeks ago, I said, I saw the folder on your desk. A draft amendment from a law firm designed to remove me as beneficiary of the segregated funds and transfer them to Meredith. Meredith's head snapped up.
What?
I also confirmed with a fiduciary firm that you've been calling them repeatedly, requesting access to my mother's trust provisions. Details Rebecca Stone correctly refused to share because you have no legal standing. Diane abandoned the tears. What replaced them was raw, genuine anger, stripped of all the silk. So what? She spat. That money's been sitting there for 20 years doing nothing. Meredith deserves it more than you. At least she contributes to this family. Mom, stop. Meredith's voice was small,
But sharp.
a crack in a wall I hadn't expected. Diane didn't hear her.
Or chose not to.
I looked at Meredith, then back at Diane. Meredith deserves what, exactly? $17 million that my mother earned? That my mother's parents built over 3 generations? For what? Instagram sponsorships charged to a trust that isn't hers. Richard's voice surfaced.
Weak.
Laura, that's enough. I turned to him. I'd been waiting for this. Enough. His favorite word. The word he used every time the truth got too close. No, Dad, I said. You don't get to say enough tonight. You lost that right when you watched 2 security guards walk me out of a ballroom and said nothing. The silence after that was different. Not composure. Not control. It was the silence of a man hearing, for the first time, the true cost of his own cowardice. Diane's hand moved to her Hermes bag. She pulled out the manila folder, the same one I glimpsed on her desk, held it up like a shield. This amendment is perfectly legal, and Richard was going to sign it.
He can't, I said.
The segregated funds are already in my name. They have been since 2006. That amendment was drafted to alter something Diane had no authority over, for assets she had no claim to, using a provision that doesn't exist. Your lawyer should have told you that. Unless you didn't give them the full picture. Diane stared. The folder trembled. A weapon that had turned to paper. I let the silence hold. Then I explained what was going to happen. Not with emotion. Not with satisfaction. The way I'd explain load calculations.
Facts.
Structure. Arithmetic. When I withdrew the $17 million tonight, the trust balance dropped from $42 million to $25 million. But over the past several years, Diane, using her position as a co-trustee, authorized loans against the trust's full value. Real estate leverage. The total outstanding debt collateralized by the trust is approximately $38 million. Richards had lifted slowly. He hadn't known the number. I saw it on his face. The specific expression of a man who'd signed things without reading them because his wife told him it was handled. The bank's loan covenant, I continued, requires the trust to maintain collateral coverage at a minimum of 1-to-1. As of 9:47 tonight, the coverage ratio is roughly 66%. $13 million short. The bank's automated compliance system has already frozen the linked accounts, credit cards, country club membership, supplemental insurance riders. Meredith whispered, "That's why my cards." Yes. Diane's voice was a blade. You planned this. You planned this to destroy us. I looked at her. Across my coffee table. Across the trust documents. Across the cold tea. Across 23 years. No, I said. I planned to come to my father's party, give him a compass that belonged to my mother, and hope for one evening to feel like his daughter. You planned a public humiliation. You planned to have me removed by security. You planned a fraudulent amendment to take my inheritance. I simply stopped waiting for you to do the right thing. Then I reached into the folder, pulled out the last document, the one I'd carried since my meeting with Aldridge, the one I hadn't shown anyone. It was an email, 6 months earlier, from Diane's personal account to her attorney, accidentally CC'd to Thomas Aldridge. I read it aloud. Every
Word.
We need to move quickly before Laura finds out about Catherine's trust provisions. Richard doesn't have the spine to stop us. The room went airless. Richard reached for the printout. Read it once. Then again. Then he set it down on the table and looked at his wife as if he were seeing her for the very first time. Not the woman in cream silk who organized his life and managed his schedule and told him when to smile, but the woman who had written "Richard doesn't have the spine" in a sentence designed to steal his dead wife's money from his living daughter. "Diane," he said. His voice was barely audible. "Is this real?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her face answered for her. The specific, unmistakable expression of someone caught not in a lie, but in the truth. "That's not revenge," I said quietly. "That's arithmetic." And that, I nodded at the email, is who she is. What happened next was the sound of a structure failing. Not all at once. Not the dramatic collapse you see in movies. The slow kind. The kind I've seen 100 times in my work. When a building stands on a compromised foundation for decades, and one day a single beam gives way, and everything above it shifts. Diane reached for the email printout, as if taking it off the table could undo the words. Richard pulled it back. She pivoted. And there it was again. The chin quiver. The glistening eyes. The hand at the throat. "She's manipulating you, Richard. Just like Catherine always did." My father stood up. In 23 years, I had never seen Richard Paxton stand up against Diane. He'd yielded. He'd deferred. He'd looked at his plate and let silence do the work of agreement. But something in that sentence, just like Catherine, hit a wall inside him that even he didn't know was still standing. "Don't," he said. His voice was shaking, but the words were stone. "Say her name." Diane stopped. Her mouth was open. No sound came out. For perhaps the first time in their marriage, she had no response prepared, because she had never imagined she'd need one. Meredith stood slowly from the sofa, her face blotchy and wet, but her voice was steadier than either of her parents.
"Laura," she said.
I didn't know about the trust, the amendment, any of it. I looked at my sister, my half-sister, the golden child, the one who'd been handed everything I'd been denied. And I saw, beneath the Tiffany necklace and the tear-streaked makeup, a 26-year-old woman standing in the wreckage of the only story she'd ever been told about her family. "I believe you didn't know about the trust, Meredith. But you knew what it felt like to watch your sister get erased from family photos. You knew what it meant when I sat at the small table every Thanksgiving. You knew, and you said nothing." She closed her eyes, nodded once. My father took a step toward me. "Laura, I'm sorry." I let the words settle. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't okay. It hadn't been okay for 23 years. And pretending otherwise would be one more form of silence. "I know you are, Dad. But sorry isn't enough anymore. I need you to do something." He waited. I laid it out.
Clearly. Simply.
The way my mother would have. 4 conditions. First, the $17 million stays in my trust. That is non-negotiable. Second, Diane's draft amendment is destroyed completely. Notarized confirmation it's been voided. Third, you retain your own attorney. Not Diane's attorney. Yours. Someone who will explain your actual financial position without anyone editing the numbers. Fourth, I am willing to rebuild a relationship with you, but it will be on equal terms, with clear boundaries. And it will not go through Diane. I paused. Those aren't punishments, Dad. They're the minimum conditions for me to trust you again. Richard looked at the trust documents, at the email printout, at the compass box I'd left behind. Then he looked at me. "Okay," he said quietly, without negotiation. Diane grabbed her bag. "This isn't over, Laura." I met her eyes. "For me, it is." What happens next is between you and your choices." She left, heels clicking down my staircase. The front door closed hard enough to rattle the glass. Meredith lingered a moment longer. She looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find it. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Laura," and followed her mother down the stairs. My father stayed. He sat back down in the olive chair and stared at his hands. And neither of us spoke for a very long time. The radiator hummed. The brownstone settled. The photograph of my mother watched us from the wall. The fallout arrived in waves. The next 72 hours were intense. Monday morning, 9 a.m. The margin call. A letter from the bank, sent via courier, with a bold letterhead and a red, urgent stamp. Richard had 60 days. Inject $13 million or liquidate assets. 2 commercial properties.
Gone.
Richard hired his own attorney that same afternoon. Not Diane's.
His own.
Patricia Hall. She pulled the full financial records. And what she found was the second detonation. Over the past 15 years, Diane had authorized $2.3 million in withdrawals from the trust's operating account. Labeled family expenses. Patricia's audit revealed they were anything but.
Personal shopping.
First-class travel.
Spa retreats.
Meredith's entire lifestyle. A down payment on a vacation property, titled solely in Diane's name. None of it approved. None of it disclosed to Richard. All of it a breach of fiduciary duty. Diane was given a choice: repay the $2.3 million through a structured plan, or face civil liability and removal as co-trustee. The country club membership? Still frozen. The insurance riders?
Lapsed.
Meredith's credit cards? Still dark. 2 days after the margin call, Meredith Paxton quietly deactivated her Instagram. No announcement. No farewell post. Just a single story, taking some time offline. It was the first honest thing she'd posted in years. A week after the party, my father called. Not through Diane. Not through a secretary. He picked up the phone himself. Asked if I'd have coffee. We met at the French bistro. My mother's favorite.
He was already seated.
He looked older. Not gradually, but suddenly. Like a decade had landed on him in 7 days. His shirt collar was loose. His eyes shadowed. He hadn't shaved well. On the table, the velvet box.
"I opened it," he said.
The brass compass lay in his palm. I'd spent weeks restoring it. Polishing. Repairing. The engraved initials, CH, finally legible again. "She was my compass," he said, turning it over in his hands. "Your mother. And I let someone else steer." He was crying. Quietly. The way men of his generation cry. Jaw tight. Eyes spilling. No sound. I hadn't seen him cry since the funeral. 23 years ago. I didn't say, "It's okay." Because it wasn't.
Not yet.
Maybe not for a long time. But I said, "I'm glad you're here, Dad." That's a start. He told me he'd asked Diane to move out. Temporarily. Not a divorce. Not yet. But a separation. She was at a hotel.
He needed space, he said.
To understand what had happened to his life while he wasn't paying attention. We ordered coffee. Then, without planning it, we both ordered the croque madame. My mother's standing order, every Sunday, at that same table. Neither of us mentioned it. We didn't need to. 2 weeks after the party, Diane came to my door. Alone. No mascara this time. No silk gown. A gray cashmere coat over a simple black dress. Her face bare. No foundation. No careful concealer. Just the raw map of a 58-year-old woman who hadn't been sleeping. The Cartier love bracelet?
Gone.
I learned later she'd sold it to start repaying the $2.3 million. She didn't buzz the intercom. Must have followed someone through the front door. I opened my apartment door and found her standing on my landing. Arms at her sides. Smaller than I'd ever seen her. "You've ruined everything I built," she said. Not angry. Not performed. It was the flattest, most honest thing Diane Paxton had ever said to me. I leaned against my doorframe. "You built on someone else's foundation, Diane. My mother's money. My mother's husband. Even my mother's daughter. You tried to erase me so you could keep the stage to yourself. She flinched. Not the theatrical flinch. The real one. The kind that happens in the muscles around the eyes. And then she said something I didn't expect. I was terrified, Laura. Her voice cracked. Every single day for 23 years, I was terrified that one day you'd show up and take it all away. And you did. I looked at her. I understood the fear. The way you understand the rot inside a wall you've opened up. It doesn't excuse the damage, but you can see where it started. I didn't take anything that was yours, I said. I took what was mine. The difference is you never understood there was a difference. She held my gaze for a long moment. No apology came. I didn't expect one. Diane Paxton was many things, but she was not a woman who apologized. Not to me. Not to anyone she'd placed beneath her. She turned, walked down the stairs. Her footsteps, slower than I'd ever heard them. No click of designer heels. Just the quiet pad of flat shoes on old wood. I closed the door, leaned my forehead against it, breathed. 3 months later, I stood on a stage again. But this time, no one asked security to remove me. The National Trust for Historic Preservation Gala. A restored Beaux-Arts ballroom. I was a guest of honor, presenting the inaugural project of the Catherine Hale Foundation, a nonprofit I'd established using a portion of the trust funds, restoring endangered historic buildings in underserved communities. My first project, a community center in Baltimore, built in 1912, abandoned in 1987, condemned in 2014. We were bringing it back. Load-bearing walls. Original tile. The whole skeleton saved. I wore an emerald green dress. Simple. Well cut. My mother's Mikimoto pearl earrings. Behind me, on a screen 6 feet tall, the Catherine Hale Foundation. Preserving what matters. My father was in the audience. Front row. He'd driven down from Westchester alone. No Diane. No entourage. Just Richard Paxton in a navy suit, sitting upright, watching his daughter speak. I talked about buildings. The ones everyone walks past without seeing. The ones that get condemned because it's easier to tear something down than do the hard, slow, unglamorous work of finding what's still good underneath. I talked about my mother, an architect I never knew was an architect, who built things that held for decades because she understood everything beautiful starts with structure. When I finished, the room stood. My father stood first. Afterward, he found me near the coat check. He was holding a flat, rectangular package, wrapped in brown paper. I opened it, and went still. It was the architectural rendering I'd given him at the retirement party. The original blueprint of his first building. He'd had it framed in dark walnut. Museum-quality glass. Archival matting. It's been on my wall since the day you gave it to me, he said. I just never told Diane. I held the frame against my chest, looked at my father. This flawed, frightened, trying man. And I didn't say, it's okay. I said, thank you, Dad. That means more than you know. We walked out together into the cool DC night. 2 weeks later, a handwritten letter arrived in the mail. No return address. But I recognized the stationery. Meredith. 3 pages, front and back. In careful handwriting. An apology. Not the performative kind. Not the kind that explains itself away. The raw, stumbling, honest kind that a 26-year-old writes when she's seeing her life clearly for the first time. I haven't replied yet, but the letter sits on my desk, next to my mother's letter, next to the compass box. Some things take time. Some buildings can't be restored in a season. But the foundation, the real one, the one beneath everything, that is sound. So, that's my story. I didn't win because I screamed louder. I didn't win because I had more money, or more power, or more cruelty than the people who tried to erase me. I won because 23 years ago, while she was dying, my mother sat down with a lawyer, a pen, and a stack of legal paper. And she built something that would hold. She didn't do it with drama. She didn't do it with anger. She did it with structure. The same way she built everything. I used to think strength meant enduring. Showing up to every dinner, sitting at the small table, driving home in silence, swallowing whatever was served, and calling it family. I thought if I was patient enough, quiet enough, good enough, someone would eventually see me. But no one was going to see me. Not because I was invisible, but because the people around me had decided that my invisibility was convenient for them. And the only person who could change that was the one standing in the mirror. If you're listening to this and you recognize something, the whispers, the exclusion, the way your name gets misspelled on purpose, the way your accomplishments get met with silence while someone else's get a standing ovation, I want you to know, you're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not the difficult one. And you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. My mother left me a letter that said, "Find him." And what I found wasn't just a lawyer, or a trust document, or $17 million. I found the thing she'd really been protecting all along. My right to take up space.
Thank you, Mom.
For the letter. For Mr. Aldridge. For the pearls. For teaching me that some buildings are worth saving. Including the one I live in. Before you go, if this story reminded you of someone you love, or someone you need to set a boundary with, share it with them. Not as a weapon, but as a mirror. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity, tell me in the comments below. Tell me which one you chose. I read every single one. If you're still here, if you stayed through all of it, you're exactly the kind of person who needs to hear more stories like mine. Check the description for links.